interesting day of recording. All right, now, hope it makes sense somehow. The errors of the Sun are one of the important building blocks of conciliarism, as of course, as I noticed, Americanism is. And we can only build up, as Pope St. Pius X noted, the world through the Catholic city, none other, the Catholic city. There's no solution, there's no other solution. And I want to review here in this presentation, I want to discuss briefly the Culture Kampf and Pope Pius IX's reaction to the Culture Kampf in Germany, Otto von Bismarck, an architect really of the New Deal, in restraining a tendency toward communism by having a supposedly more restrained version of statism as the antidote, just a little bit of communism to keep Bolshevism away. And I want to go into the Culture Kampf with warfare against the church, and many German immigrants, perhaps some of your ancestors, fled to this country in the wake of the Culture Kampf in Germany. And in the 1870s, after the Franco-Prussian War and the unification of the German states. And then, to a certain extent, the Italian Risorgimento. And then we'll close for today, and I'll pick this up to discuss the influences of all of these ideas on the Mexican Revolution in France, the persecution of the Mexicans, the complicity of the American bishops, many of them, and of the Vatican in the form of Cardinal Gasperi, who very ill-advised Pope Pius XI, who regretted what he did, and lived to regret what he did, insofar as agreeing to sell out with Calles, trusting Calles. So, in any event, but just by way of summary, the Protestant Revolution convinced millions upon millions of men that they did not need a visible hierarchical church to teach them what the divine Redeemer had entrusted to the magisterial authority and of Holy Mother Church, and to equip them with the supernatural helps they needed to observe that teaching, and thus to save their immortal souls. Nothing but utter chaos and ruin have followed in the wake of this revolution, which helped to establish the falsehood of the separation of church and state as a cornerstone of modernity. How few people, Catholics and non-Catholics alike, remember that Catholic church buildings were ransacked by Lutherans, Anglicans and Calvinists and other Protestants in the 16th and 17th centuries. Most of their churches are ours. All they will be again one day, please God. Come the Restoration. But they were ours, and they are ours. And the American Revolution convinced men that it was possible for them to pursue the common temporal good without referencing their last end and without submitting themselves to the Catholic Church in all that pertains to the good of souls. The anti-incarnational, religiously indifferentist principles of the American founding were also premised upon the pure Judeo-Masonic falsehood that man can be virtuous without belief in, access to, and cooperation with sanctifying grace. As we've just seen in these series of lectures, recorded today on December 28th, 2012, the Feast of the Holy Innocents, the American Revolution convinced men that it was possible for them to pursue the common temporal good without referencing. The French Revolution convinced men that they could revolt against any notion of religion, true or false, as they were taught to blame their problems on one group of people, what I call the ideology of hatred, to target one group of people and to blame them for the problems, the wealthy, in the case of the French revolutionaries, the nobility, the clergy, anybody, aristocracy, anybody socially different, hate them, target them, kill them. Their lives were dehumanized. No must be hated and subjected to the assault of the mob in the name of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Class distinctions were eliminated as everyone was addressed as citizen, except not all citizens were equal. Women, of course, were encouraged to leave the family and seek their emancipation from their husbands and children, as they took their rightful place alongside men along the barricades and then in positions of power. Continuing the legacy of the Catholic Revolution, Catholic church buildings were subjected to the most unspeakable sacrileges imaginable. Otto von Bismarck's Culture Kampf, inaugurated in The 1870s was a revolution instituted by the consummate Freemason, von Bismarck, to consolidate the power of the unified Germany as citizens were taught to obey the new hierarchy of civil authority that desired to make them more and more dependent upon the largesse of the civil state and to mind their masters without dissent, thus arrogating unto the civil state what belongs by right to the Catholic Church. Be good citizens, obey the state, ask no questions, no matter what. The elderly were forced into a retirement, and a system of social security was established to make them depend upon the largesse of the state and to drive a wedge between them and their children who were freed from their obligations under the Fourth Commandment to return unto their parents the care and support that they themselves had received before they were grown. That is, prior to Bismarck, this whole notion of retirement was purely voluntary. People worked until they dropped dead or until they decided they were physically or mentally incapable of working, at which point their children took care of them. They had plenty of children. They welcomed children generously, as few or as many as God saw fit to bestow upon them. They took care of them. And others would pitch in. And the grandchildren would learn from the wisdom of the grandparents, and if the grandparents had lost their minds, they would learn how to give Catholic charity to those grandparents and to serve them as they would serve Christ himself in the flesh. It's lost now. Assisted living programs and nursing homes. Everyone gets treated until the insurance runs out. Then they're declared brain dead. Then they're expendable. And Bismarck's program of warfare against the church, as I indicated, drove many Catholics out of Germany, out of the German states, the unified German states, to flock to these shores. Some went to Argentina. They left, just like many Italians left, Italy in the wake of the Risorgimento, and only to be co-opted by the ways of Americanism. The devil had a trap waiting for people. And the Germans who came here, a lot of them were hated by the Irish Catholics who came. A lot of them were hated by the Irish Catholic bishops. And they were resented. There were efforts to Americanize them and to divest themselves of their Germanic heritage, of their language, of their culture, of their pious traditions, all in the name of Americanization. And Pope Pius IX, and Etsi Multa, issued on the Feast of the Presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary, November 21st, 1873, wrote as follows to the German bishops about the situation of the Church in Germany. He noted, in addition to many grave injuries inflicted on the Catholic Church last year, 1872, the beginning of the culture growth, the government of Prussia, which with harsh, iniquitous laws totally different from previous ones, have subjected the whole institution and education of clerics to lay power. Lay control of the clergy, condemned by Pope Pius IX. Interesting, ladies and gentlemen. One can now legitimately ask how clerics are to be educated and informed for priestly and pastoral life. Going further still, the government grants the same lay power the right to bestow any office or ecclesiastical benefice, and even the right to deprive sacred pastors of office and benefice. Yeah, Pope Pius IX was condemning lay control of the clergy. Sorry. That is what it is. Thus, the Holy Church of Christ, whose necessary and full freedom of which religion had been repeatedly been guaranteed by public pacts and highest princes, has in these same places, meaning in Germany, been deprived of all its rights and exposed to hostile men. Its final extinction now threatens, for the new laws, to be sure, have as their intent its destruction. No wonder, then, that the former religious tranquility has been gravely disturbed in that empire by this kind of law and other plans and actions of the Prussian government most hostile to the Church. But who would wish to falsely cast the blame of the disturbance on the Catholics of the German Empire? For they are faulted for not acquiescing in such laws in which they could not acquiesce with good conscience. If they are faulted for not acquiescing in such laws in which they could not acquiesce with good conscience. For the same reason, the apostles of Jesus Christ and the martyrs who preferred to undergo the most dreadful tortures and death itself than to betray their duty and violate the rights of their most holy religion by obeying the commands of the princes who persecuted them, must also be faulted. That is, we must stand for truth. If no other laws than those of the civil authority existed, and if they were of the highest order, it would be wrong to transgress them, Barack Obama. If, moreover, these same civil laws constituted the norm of conscience, as some maintain both imbecilely and absurdly, the early martyrs and their followers would have been worthy of reprehension rather than honor and praise, because they did not die for religious liberty, Joseph Ratzinger Benedict says. They died for the Catholic faith because they refused to burn the grains of incense before the idols of the false religions. They did not die to have our Lord placed alongside the false religions. They died in defense of the truth of Christ the King. Indeed, it would have been against the laws and wishes of the princes to hand down the Christian faith, propagated and founded the Church. Nevertheless, the faith teaches and human reason demonstrates that there is a twofold order of things. Two kinds of powers must be distinguished on earth, one natural that looks to the tranquility and secular business of human society, the other whose origin is above nature, which is in charge of the Church of Christ, divinely instituted for the salvation and peace of souls. The offices of these two powers are wisely coordinated, not separated, Ratzinger Benedict and Americanists, so that things which belong to God are returned to God, and because of God, those of Caesar to Caesar. Who for this reason is great, because he is less than heaven, for he belongs to him whom heaven and all creatures belong. From this divine command, to be sure, Pope Pius IX noted, the Church is never turned aside. It is always and everywhere. It always everywhere and at all time attempts to inculcate in the faithful an inviolable obedience towards their supreme rulers and their rights, insofar as they are secular, and it is taught with the apostle that they are rulers not for fear of good works but of evil, teaching the faithful to be subject not only because of fear, but because the prince bears the sword to carry out his ire against him who has done evil, but also because of conscience, because in his office he is a minister of God. However, this fear of the princes, the Church limits to evil acts, meaning evil acts do not bind human consciences, excluding the same totally from the observance of the divine law. Being mindful of what Blessed Peter taught to the faithful, may none of you suffer for being a murderer, a thief, a criminal, or an informer upon the faithful. Look, there's where that secret chapel is. That's what that guy's doing. This is what this man's doing. Don't go here. Don't go there. Edmund Campion betrayed by an informer. But if any of you should suffer for being a Christian, then he is not to be ashamed of it. Let him glorify in that name. Since these things are so, you understand how sad we must have been when we read in the recent letter from the German Emperor the unexpected accusation against certain of his Catholic subjects, especially against the Catholic clergy and bishops. The reason for this accusation is that they, fearing neither bonds nor tribulations, and not placing any great value on their lives, refuse to obey the aforementioned laws. Whether your name is Bismarck, whether your name is Robespierre or Danton, whether your name is Caillez, whether your name is Lenin or Stalin or Khrushchev, or Mao Zedong, or Ho Chi Minh, or Fidel Castro, or Barack Hussein Obama, no matter who you are, you seek to impose that which is opposed to the divine positive law and the natural law, and that's contrary to the good of souls, upon us, and we must oppose you. Not with force of arms, no. With our prayers, with our deeds, and with our words. We will oppose you. You want to arrest us? Send us to psychiatric camps, call us haters, You do that. And that is our martyrdom. That is the glory. And maybe the way many of us save our souls. It's the exact same thing the Soviet Union. You oppose the civil state, you're mentally ill. Schizophrenia. If you're opposed to the state, you're opposed to the government, so the government is God. It is not. Mere mortals believe they're infallible. The very people who deny the possibility of infallibility of revealed truths, in that a true pope is indeed infallible on matters of faith and morals, believe they're infallible, and nobody can dissent from them. It's an incredible thing. Incredible contradiction. Incredible hypocrisy. Catholics protest with the same firmness shown before the passing of these laws. They pointed out their faults by serious, clear, and most solid explanations which, with the approval of the whole Catholic world, and even of some heterodox men, they delivered to the Prince, his administrators, and Supreme Council of the Kingdom. For the same reason, now they are accused of treason, just like the Cristeros would be, as if they were conspiring with those who strive to upset all orders of human society, meaning the communists. No attention is paid to the excellent arguments in which they clearly attest their unbroken loyalty and obedience to the Prince and their lively devotion to their fatherland. They were good Germans. They loved Germany. Indeed, we ourselves are asked to exhort Catholics and holy pastors there to observe these laws. This would be equivalent to our contributing to the oppression and dispersion of the flock of Christ. However, supported by God, we are confident the most serene Emperor, having more carefully weighed things, will reject the empty suspicion conceived against his most loyal subjects and will no longer allow their honor to be reviled with foul detraction. In addition, he will end the unmerited persecution against them. Moreover, we will have willingly passed over the imperial letter if it had not been published against our knowledge and in a most unusual fashion by an official newspaper in Berlin. It was published together with other written material written by us, in which we appealed for justice from the Emperor for the Catholic Church in Prussia. In other words, the Holy Father's own correspondence was published as being subversive to the German state. And he condemned, obviously, the support of the heretics who called themselves the Old Catholics. Bismarck favored Catholics who he thought were acceptable, the Old Catholics who rejected papal infallibility. As defined dogmatically, it's always been believed, but defined dogmatically by the Vatican Council, today called the First Vatican Council. And just like today, the only safe Catholics are the conciliar Catholics. And the Freemasons in Italy were going about their work at the same time, and in stripping the Anticlerical Law, stripping the church of her rights, of her property, of driving out many of the clergy, many of the consecrated religious, and St. John Bosco, the great saint of Turin, to whom we are so devoted. St. John Bosco, father and teacher of the young, in need of special help. I appeal with confidence to you, St. John Bosco, for I require not only spiritual graces but also temporal ones, and particularly we name our intention. May you, who had such compassion on the poor, and we name our intentions, may you with such compassion, may you who are so devoted to the blessed to Jesus and the blessed sacrament, to Mary, help of Christians, and who has such great concern for the poor, obtain for us what we pray for. St. John Bosco. That's not the full part of the last prayer. We pray it every night. I'm drawing a blank now. That first part is verbatim. But may you who on earth has a great compassion for the poor, but St. John Bosco was placed under suspicion for what was termed anti-government activities. What were they? The education of the youth. This is what Pope Leo XIII, writing in Etsi Nos, February 15th, 1882, some 8 years and 3 months after Pope Pius IX wrote Etsi Multa, wrote as follows about Masonry and the anti-clerical campaign in Italy. In the midst of the populations of Italy, which have always been so constant and steadfast in the faith of their fathers, liberty of the church is wounded on all sides. Everyday efforts are redoubled in order to efface from the public institutions the Christian stamp and character which had always and with good reason been the seal of the glories of Italy. that, as I've explained, in Catholic Europe, the devil had to systematically root out the cross of the divine Redeemer, first by means of the Protestant Revolution and then the social revolutions of modernity. Whereas here in this country, even though the cross of the divine Redeemer had been planted by the French missionaries, the English settled, were triumphant along the Atlantic seaboard. They expanded westward. Catholic lands were taken over. The Catholic lands of the Southwest, South and Southwest, were taken over by the Anglo-Saxon settlers, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant settlers, and Catholics there reduced to minority status and to subservient status in many instances, and the Catholic culture replaced and mocked and vilified by so many. But the cross of Christ was never implanted here as the foundation of social order. Therefore, the devil didn't have to attack the faith directly, although he attacked individual Catholics, and there's a great deal of anti-Catholicism. He knew that Catholics, as I've explained, would be undermined over the course of time by toleration. And they would be converted in time, hence what I call conversion in reverse. Italy, the cross of Christ had to be rooted out, as in France, as in Catholic Germany, converted by St. Boniface, as in Catholic Spain. Catholic Eastern Europe, the cross had to be eradicated by one means or another. Catholic England. In the midst of the populations of Italy, which has always been so constant and steadfast in the faith of their fathers, the liberty of the church is wounded on all sides. Everyday efforts are redoubled in order to efface from the public institutions that Christian stamp and character, which has always and with good reason been the seals of the glory of Italy. Religious houses suppressed, the goods of the church confiscated, marriages contracted in spite of the laws and without the rights of the church, the position of the religious authorities as to the education of the young utterly ignored, in fine, a cruel and deplorable war without limit and without measure declared against the Apostolic See. This is what Pope Pius IX was declaring the Italian Risorgimento was. It was the liberation of Italy according to principles of Masonry. It was the warfare against the church, the warfare against the papal states. Papal states had already fallen by then. And as a consequence, he is decrying the Freemasonry, the religiously indifferentist, anti-clerical, anti-incarnational spirit of Freemasonry, Judeo-Masonry, which would attack the faith and attack Italy to its very core. And he said more than this, he says. The Roman pontiff finds himself reduced to extreme anguish, for despoiled of his civil princedom as the king who would exercise the social reign of Christ the King over men and their nations, he has of necessity fallen into the hands of another power. In other words, he was the prisoner of the Vatican. More than this, Rome, the most august of Christian cities, is now a place laid open to all the enemies of the church. Profane novelties defile it. Does it sound like what's happening in Rome now? And the church is held in conciliar captivity right in the Basilica of St. Peter. Here and there, temples and schools devoted to heresy are to be found. That's worldwide now, is it not? In your local parish, temples and schools devoted to heresy are to be found. It is even reported that this year, 1882, it is about to receive the deputies and leaders of the sect which is most embittered against Catholicism, meaning Freemasonry, who have appointed this city as the place for their solemn meeting. And now it is the place, one of their national headquarters, with Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, who said one of the goals of the so-called Second Vatican Council was to do what? Was to reconcile what he believes was the Catholic Church with the new principles of that new era inaugurated in 1789 with, obviously, the French Revolution. The reasons which have determined their choice of such a meeting place are no secret. They desire by this outrageous provocation to glut the hatred which they nourish against the church, and to bring their incendiary torches within reach of the Roman pontificate by attacking its very seat. And Pope Pius IX went on to explain in 1892 in his encyclical letter on Masonry in Italy, Custodi di Quella Fede, he noted that everyone should avoid familiarity or friendship with anyone suspecting of belonging to Masonry or affiliated groups. Know them by their fruits and avoid them. Every familiarity should be avoided, not only with those impious libertines who openly promote the character of the sect, but also with those who hide under the mask of universal tolerance, respect for all religions, and the craving to reconcile the maxims of the gospel with those of the revolution, those men seeking Christ to reconcile Christ and Belial, the Church of God and the state without God. Let me read that over to you again, in case you're a little slow, right? Every familiarity should be avoided, not only with those impious libertines who openly promote the character of the sect, but also with those who hide under the mask of universal tolerance, respect for all religions, and the craving to reconcile the maxims of the gospel with those of the revolution, those seeking to reconcile Christ and Belial, the Church of God and the state without God. That is Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI. That's Andrew Roncalli, John the 23rd. That's Giovanni Montini, Paul VI. That is Albino Luciani, John Paul I, Carol Wojtyła, John Paul II, and Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI. That's your counterfeit church of conciliarism. Do you have any questions? Good. I'm glad I clarified all of those for you. That's excellent. Superb. All right. All of this, folks, will be crystallized 50 years ago. It's being celebrated now, the so-called Second Vatican Council. These ideas would mutate by then evolutionism, which I'll discuss in an upcoming lecture when I get into communism. Evolution had already taken root. God was evolving, we're evolving. Sure, you believe you're descended from an ape, you're going to evolve into acting like one. It would all influence Our Lady's dear country of Mexico and result in the terrible calamities that afflicted the Cristeros, so brave in the face of the Calleses and of the other revolutionaries who sought to eradicate the cross of the Divine Redeemer from Our Lady's beloved country, and which many Americans participated in and made possible with their own taxpayer dollars, and which sadly Cardinal Gasperi in Rome convinced Pope Pius XI to agree to an accommodation which he later regretted, because Gasperi believed in all things American. Even then, the road was being paved to the so-called Second Vatican Council. Be not afraid, ladies and gentlemen. The Church is undergoing the mystical body, the mystical death and burial of her Son now. She will rise again when there is the triumph of Our Lady's sorrowful and immaculate heart. In the meantime, continue to pray your rosaries. Seek out the true sacraments from true bishops and priests who make no concessions to conciliarism. Viva Cristo Rey. Bear the cross well. Viva la Virgen de Guadalupe. Pray your rosaries. God bless you all.